Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
All right, good morning and welcome to the show. It's another week, another beautiful time to spend our morning with you and start our days with each other. On Monday, March 27th, 2023, it's the day, the Monday after the judgment that was given by the appeal court on Friday, reinstating Governor Ademola Adeleke. And so the state has been in that mood, different reactions on both sides, the APC reacting, the PDP reacting, the people on the streets giving their own, so many, what's it called now? Bar analysts, newspaper stand, lawyers, everybody analyzing the judgment. But really, that's what has been happening in Osun State. On that note, welcome to the show this morning. My name is Emmanuel Ojadegele. We're reaching you live from StarTimes Channel 190 on the DTT platform. You can follow us on all our social media handles on Facebook and Instagram, and of course on Twitter at WSTV_NG. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel to follow live and catch up with episodes of the program. Thank you for starting your day with us this morning.
All right, Emmanuel, just as you said, and to buttress that point, it's been, an almost all celebratory mode out there. People at the market. I mean, I was at the market and the woman was very happy that it was Adeleke. And there was even a woman, that was at a program and she heard that the judgment was in favor of Oyetola, and she started crying. People have got some sort of reprieve since Governor Adeleke became governor, and it's really been, some different reactions from people. Yes. But good morning. Thanks for joining us on the Morning Spring this morning on Western Spring Television. I'm Temitope Ajijola.
All right, well, a lot of fake news defined that Friday. So many persons tweeting what was not. And also, that's our call to you this morning, that you always verify any form of information before you push it out. Some of us have fallen for the scheme and scam that is fake news. At some point in your life, you also fall for those things, but always do well to verify.
You need to verify every report.
All right, let's take the papers now, but we'll do that after this short break. Welcome back. We begin with the Punch newspaper this morning. Banner headline says INEC votes 3 billion naira to fight electoral cases. On page 2, APC, PDP, LP differ on Commission's litigation budget. Litigation costly. Budget may not be enough. Senior lawyers. So INEC is earmarking 3 billion naira to fight electoral cases. I mean, who gives them the money? It's the government agency, so it's government money.
Yes, and then I would just like to say that this is what we get when we don't do our duties, as we ought. And then if you are to complain, you should think about, the foreseeable future. You should know that cases will come. People will not just go rest. We also, that there were some, discrepancies with some of these things. And if you are saying that, the budget is expensive, you should also not play with people's future, people's lives and decisions. You should do things as correctly as possible.
Okay, so now let's get away from that because of our time quickly now. The pictorial story there shows Buhari, Obasanjo, Jonathan, others mourn as Dia dies at 78. That's the de facto Nigeria's de facto president at some point, second in command only to General Sani Abacha, who died at the age of 78. A lot of condolences and commiseration coming into the family. We hope that, we pray that his soul finds rest. At the bottom strip of the Punch newspaper, FSOA as foreign airlines begin hike exchange rates. FSOA as foreign airlines hike exchange rates. Last man arrests fake official making 35,000 naira daily. Wow. I mean,
cases
some stories just surprise you.
And fake officers here and there. But I'm glad that this person has been nabbed, and more. We expect more to come.
We expect more to come because some innocent civilians, some innocent
fallen
citizens
victims to these people.
35,000 naira daily, multiply
no
that
joke.
by weekly,
Yes.
week, multiply monthly, and you see that this person earns illicit money way higher than what people who are doing positive jobs
Yes.
do. Good. Well, on page 41, ex-governor donates 240 truck foodstuffs, group to feed 2,000 daily. That's for Ramadan.
Yes,
Well,
and
very
that's
good one
a
then.
commendable
Yes,
one.
people should take the time and the period, the season, to care for others, the less privileged, look out for others, their brothers and your sister,
Yes.
and do well to always make sure that people are comfortable as much as you have the means.
Means.
A lot above the Punch newspaper, PDP vows probe as Benue ward suspends RU. Some big story yesterday. The ward level, the PDP in Benue State, this man's ward suspended him. That's the national chairman of the PDP, Yocha Ayu. And the PDP is saying
The message is quite clear. If the national body refuses to do something, we at the wards would start doing something.
And now the PDP at national level is saying that they will probe that incident. They will do that.
Well, I think the PDP should not belabor this particular issue any more than they're already doing, because it was one of the things that cost them a lot during the elections. And going forward, they should start, putting things in place, structures that would move the party forward and not further divide it along different lines now. So they should start looking at their internal issues and solve it before it escalates and, causes more rifts in the party.
All right, page 16 of the Punch newspaper, UK to sanction 10 Nigerians. Envoy Chides Fani Coyote. Interesting and a very good one there.
Yes, and I'll wait to see the names that will be on this list of people to be sanctioned by the UK.
By the UK.
I hope that we find the names that would really speak volumes and keep people in check this time around.
Political rascals. Afenifere Knox Inwayahu demands Ohanese's clarification. That's on page 16 of the Punch newspaper. Some back and forth going on since last week. Reportedly, some statements made by the head of the Ohanese Indigo, referring to a particular group of people as political rascals. But some have said that it was just a passing line referring to those. But I'm not in the Indigo, Ohanese Indigo. So the Afenifere is asking Wanyahu and Ohanese to give clarification, which I actually agree with.
Yes.
We are currently in a situation where the littlest things can have volatile impacts. People should be very deliberate and intentional with their choice of words. Make sure that it's something that can be easily understood and explained when called upon to do so. But that's all on the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right, quickly on the Daily Trust, we have the headline as how NIS operatives extort. That's investigation, how NIS operatives extort travelers at airports. And the writers, I paid $100 to get my Virgin passport cleared. And that's according to a passenger. 8 officers sacked, 88 facing disciplinary measures. And FAN, that's FAN, decries extortion. And that's on page 4. Well, over the years now, we've been hearing cases of extortion differently from different people. And if somebody is saying that he had to pay to get his Virgin passport cleared, and that's really, pointing danger signs to people. I mean, even at the airport. I mean, what if this person is not clean? You just have to clear him, and you had to get money from doing that. So I think, and then the fact that they're decrying this extortion, I don't know, but the airport authority should look into this, case and do the right things at this time.
Yes, they should.
It's very important.
The reason for FAN making that statement is sometimes the authorities, the people in charge now are unaware of some of these things.
Yeah.
So it comes as shock to them and to us as ordinary people.
Well, I think that officially they may not know. I mean, it's not an authorized thing to do. But I'm sure they've got wind that people
of course, and that's why they're making this move.
Yes.
You know? They need to be decisive.
Yes.
They need to be decisive.
Yes. They have to be deliberate about it. I mean, when you've been hearing some things as rumor, you should put measures in place to, you know, get the true picture of things. And that's what they failed to do. And at this time, it's really not right for us. So we need to start doing things better to move forward. And then just below that story, we see Oladipo Dia, the general who escaped execution, finally bows out. But that's one hilarious way to put it. And then we still pray for the repose of his soul. That more of that story is on page 4. Then police ban protests in Nasarawa, arrest 79 in Sokoto. That's on page 6. Well, I think we still have big issues with protests in Nigeria.
Yeah, and this is coming because of the elections.
Yes.
I've seen some of the protests in Nasarawa, and they're not very, very, heartwarming. They are protests that would make you feel so bad and so sad, actually, because you see people's mothers and sisters going about wailing on the street. You know, it speaks to the fact that sometimes people have grievances that they need to air, and you may not be able to control how they'll go about that. And then the police banning the protest in Nasarawa, I really don't know about that at all.
It doesn't speak well of the kind of government that we have. It doesn't at all. I mean, you can deploy means to curb the actions of people from being but stopping it outrightly is really wrong. And we need to move past that soon. But on page 28, we have 5 most attractive property destinations in Kano. Well, and on page 14, aftermath of polls, plot to sack Ayu thickens. Well, we've seen that coming. It's been a long time coming. Yes. And Ayu should probably start preparing, packing his, Well,
the plot may be unofficial, maybe because he has always said that if the party asks him to go, he will go, and then the party hasn't made that.
Well, if it's official or not, it's thickening, and it's only a matter of time before it gets to the right parties. You have to start things from the grassroots, and you start getting key players to sympathize with you along that line, then you get what you want. But then just below the nameplate, oil production rises to 1.7 million BPD, that's barrel per day, according to FG. Oil production rises to 1.7 million barrels per day, and that's on page 23. Well, Anambra indigents denying us accommodation. Macban raises alarm. Anambra indigents denying us accommodation. Macban raises alarm.
That's a very bad one there. We shouldn't be at this point. We've always said it on the show. We need to learn how to coexist.
Yes.
We can't keep doing this, denying people accommodation.
Yeah, remember the Lagos issue. Yes. And then if Anambra is doing this now, it's almost speaking to the fact that it's just a case of kettle, pots calling kettle black and all that. And each player needs to stop. Whether from any region, we need to stop that and be more accommodating if we want a better Nigeria. Well, that moving from that story to page 13, Kogi, Bayelsa, Imo governorship polls, APC rakes in over 1.3 billion naira from forms. Imagine that. Just about 3 states now, and APC rakes in over 1.3 billion naira from forms.
We've always talked about the monetization of the process.
Yes.
A lot of funds are pumped into the election from the primary stage.
Yes, to other stages, and how we are really not making the real people that are supposed to be there like competence, and all of that. Because and that's what brings people just with money and the fame. This is what puts them there because of the monetization of these forms, and the forms are really exorbitant. Well, that's all on the Daily Trust.
Very quickly, we'll just take the headlines and the stories on The Nation. The banner headline, post-poll crisis, are you under pressure to quit as PDP chair? What EXCO suspends party boss why he must go now by his deputy. There's a quote there. IU was involved in anti-party activities, making the PDP lose at its ward and local government, along with his allies, who also didn't vote at the governorship election. End of quote. And I will get more on that story on page 4 of The Nation. At the bottom of the strip, how unbundling of railways power boosts economy by experts. Devolution will encourage competition, enhance true federalism. 3.4 billion naira debt. Court blocks Oyo government's accounts in 4 banks. That's on page 27. Foreign reserves dip by $1.43 billion in 10 weeks. You see that on page 4 of The Nation. NPC fixes May 3 for population census. NAFDAC alert on recalled eye drop. APC clears Uzodinma Silva Leon Adeyemi for primaries. Why I dropped my ambition by Faleke. So on page 5 of The Nation newspaper. And that's how we end the paper review this morning. When we come back from this break, we'll take our guests for you to look at the conversation that we have this morning.
Dramatist, playwright, and icon of Yoruba thematic arts, Duro Ladipo was born December 18, 1931 in Osogbo, southwest Nigeria. His clergyman father christened him Timothy. His other names, Duro Dola, Duro Shomo, Duro Rike, reflected his persona and the circumstances that surrounded his birth. The legendary stage actor had in several public fora identified himself as one of the greatest abikus born to die in this world. Family records reveal how he was born and died 13 times. The intertwining names he bore thus lent credence to his spiritism. Duro Ladipo was one of the best known and world-acclaimed Yoruba dramatists to emerge from post-colonial Africa. His notable works, Obakoso, Obawaja, and Moremi, took him beyond Africa to several parts of the world. By the time Duro Ladipo died on 11 March 1978, the Nigeria's first cultural ambassador had acquired a towering image as an artist whose works adorned the frontage of Trenchard Hall, University of Ibadan. Western Spring Television identifies Duro Ladipo as a major character in history.
Can you imagine the feeling when you get your news as the break with facts and clarity? Our news are reported as it is.
In Africa, and all those who masterminded the way it happened, we have to pay a price.
Enjoy Western programs, projecting culture and tradition to the world. Brought to you as the break and recapped every hour for your update.
We must never forget the sacrifices of the heroes of Nigeria's democracy.
Produced and brought to you in a unique way never before seen.
Western Spring
and Western Spring Television. Television is coming home in your color and culture.
Èkó Lagos. Èkó akéte ìlú ọgbọ́n, Èkó akéte ìlú ìmọ̀, ọmọ ọlọ́gbọ́n dorí ẹja mú, àwọn òmùgọ̀ àdì mú nírù. Ẹni dèkó tí ò gbọ́n, ọgbọ́n rẹ̀ dọ̀run alákejì. Gẹ́gẹ́ bí àrọ́bá, ẹni tó tẹ ìṣẹ́ridó tó sì kọ́kọ́ gbé ibẹ̀ lọ́dún 1699 ló jẹ́ ọdẹ tí orúkọ rẹ̀ ń jẹ́ Ògúnfúnminíre, ọmọ ọba ìlú Ilé Ifẹ̀ ní í ṣe. Ó máa ń ṣọdẹ lọ síbẹ̀ láti Ifẹ̀. Ó sì pàgọ́ tó ti máa ń sinmi ṣáájú kó tún tó lọ bẹ ilé rẹ̀ wò. nígbà tó yá àwọn ọdẹ mìíràn wá darapọ̀ mọ́ láti ṣọdẹ nínú igbó yìí ni wọ́n bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní ṣọdẹ tí wọ́n sì ń pọ̀ sí pẹ̀lú àwọn
All right, welcome back to the show this morning. Still Morning Spring, where we bring it to you as it is and tell you what is happening around you. It's the Monday after the declaration of the pronouncement of the judgment by the Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja that reinstated the governor of Osun State, Ademola Adeleke, as a lawfully elected governor in the July 16th poll. Remember that matter began last year after the July 16th governorship election in August, where the petition tribunal in Osun State began sitting and delivered judgment on the 27th, removed Governor Adeleke and said Governor Adegboyega Oyetola won that election after some of its pronouncement. And then, dissatisfied by that, Adeleke approached the Court of Appeal, and on the 13th, that appeal was heard in Lagos, in Abuja, and now on Friday, that appeal was given judgment. So we're joined live in the studio now by counsel to, of course, Governor Senator Ademola Adeleke, Star Barrister Niyi Owolade. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start with your reaction, your immediate reaction to that judgment of the appeal court. What do you make of it vis-a-vis what was earlier given at the tribunal?
Thank you very much one more time. The Friday judgment, the 24th of March, 2023, is the historic date. Not only for the good people of Osun, but also for Nigeria. Because on that day, the justices of the Court of Appeal came down to give a historic judgment. It's the first time classical on use of beavers. The beavers, which we all know is novel, is a new thing. And I know that judgment will be with us for generations to come. We were happy that justice was served. That at the end of the day, after the judgment of the tribunal, which we felt was perverse, was not in accordance with the law, the Court of Appeal did the right thing, and justice was indeed served from Friday, the 24th of March.
Okay, so let's look at the grounds. When the appeal was filed initially on the 9th of February, it was a 31-ground appeal. But the Court of Appeal ruled on 7 major points. Now, can you take us through this point? I have them here. And so let's just start with the first one. The summary of the ruling actually was that the preponderance of proof that there was over voting in the election rested on the petitioner. So let's look at the issues one after the other now. The first issue was as to the validity of the lead judgment co-signed by Member 2. That was a major talking point from the tribunal judgment. Some people in your party were saying that it was wrong, the judgment wouldn't stand, but the Court of Appeal seemed to have a different opinion about it.
Well, the Court of Appeal, and one more time, I must really commend their judgment. Honorable Justice Mohammed Shuaibu was the presiding justice, told us on the 13th in the open court that he had been with INEC before. As a matter of fact, he was once a presiding officer. And he had read all the briefs. Because as you rightly said, on the 13th of March was when all the briefs were adopted. It was only on the issue of beavers that was new to him. Every other thing with regards to the process in INEC. So he was really the right person to head that appeal. Somebody who was conversant with the process of INEC. And I must say also that he knows the law. because you have some judges who are good in certain parts who are not, but he really knows the law, especially with regards to our electoral process. On the issue of which you mentioned, he was of the view, of course he went memory lane on section 294 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but at the end of the day he came to the point of view that yes, while judges should write their judgment, yes, he was of the view, and the other two also concord with him, with Honorable Justice Shuaibu, that the signing, which we all know that Chief Magistrate Shuaibu did not sign. I mean, she did not write any comment on the face of the judgment. He was of the view that only the courts of appeal and the Supreme Court, after going through the various cases, that they were the ones who should write comments on that. It's still, I think we've not had the last of that aspect, because if you say judges of records, there's still that school of thought that believe that if you are judge of record and you are in a tribunal, or you're not the only person there, you should also make your own comments. But at the end of the day, yes, Justice Shuaibu, just like Justice Ifeoma Ofor and Justice Stephen Adda, they agreed with him that yes, Section 294, you have to sign. But judges of record, it's still an issue. Yes, you can sign if you're not of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. But once you're a justice of the Court of Appeal and of the Supreme Court, it's simple. You have to, this cardinal that you write on the face of the record of the judgment.
All right, so let's look at the issue of, there's some issues that are not really clear. Look at the second issue of jurisdiction. The appellate court held that although the law allows the tribunal to suspend decisions on preliminary objections until the end of the matter, the Osun Governorship Tribunal failed to show in writing that it considered Governor Adeleke's preliminary objection in its merit. Consequently, the issue of jurisdiction was resolved in favor of the appellant. Now, what were the preliminary objections that the Court of Appeal ruled that the tribunal did not consider in merit?
At the beginning of the trial, there was a series of preliminary objections. Of course, there were three parties. INEC, the candidate, and the party, that is the PDP. Various preliminary objections were raised, which Justice Kume, who was the chairman of the panel, said they should defer all to the end of the tribunal. And the Court of Appeal, in their wisdom, felt that it negates the rule of justice. Fair hearing. Fair hearing is always very crucial. You deferred everything to the end. Pronouncements, were the right pronouncements made? That's the key. All the preliminary objections raised. And so I think that was the issue which the Court of Appeal was referring to.
But would those preliminary objections, if they had been heard at the beginning, would they have in any way affected the outcome of the tribunal's judgment?
Of course. You see, when you have preliminary objections raised, it is important for the judge to sit down and rule and see to that, to make a decision, make a call on it. If you make a call, then you move forward. So that was what the Court of Appeal was referring to.
One of the grounds for which the APC challenged the Governor Adeleke's victory at the tribunal was the issue of the certificate. And I recall that we had some lawyers on the show who told us that there was a judgment in realm, on that particular issue. did you, at the outcome of the tribunal, before it got to the appeal, did you find it, how did you see that the tribunal still, made pronouncements on that particular petition, that angle to the petition? And now the appeal court is saying that the tribunal should not have done that. It should have taken cognizance of the judgments that exonerated Senator Adeleke. How do you reconcile the fact that the tribunal went ahead to speak on the issue?
No, that was an unfortunate part. I was surprised, like most lawyers were surprised, that a matter that had been dealt with by the Court of Appeal. One of the most important concepts of law is that we have this principle of stare decisis. We have hierarchical of courts. The Court of Appeal had made pronouncement, and Honorable Justice Agim, who is now of the Supreme Court, wrote a fantastic judgment, and that had been settled. So it was rather surprising that this was brought up yet again. And the Court of Appeal, jealously guarded that major principle. The Court of Appeal had made a pronouncement. It's not for the lower court to contradict that. You cannot contradict what the Court of Appeal had made a ruling on. So bringing that back, even once there is a judgment of the Court of Appeal, any lower court must subscribe to it. And that's why we have a concept of precedent that we all refer to. It's like if the Supreme Court had made a decision on something, the Court of Appeal will not say otherwise. Yeah.
Okay. Now, before we go into the other aspect of the petition, now the appeal rather, that was decided by the Court of Appeal, I'd like to ask you, when the tribunal judgment was given, I was in court and I saw how tempers fled, particularly your colleague, the counsel to the PDP now, Chief Nathaniel Kerr, wasn't really satisfied with the whole thing. And of course, you rightly approached the Court of Appeal. Did you at any point have any doubt, or did you at any point looked at the appeal presented by Governor Adeleke and felt this may not scale through?
No, we were confident of what we had. I was one of the counsels that represent the candidate, that's Senator Ademola Adeleke, who is the governor, the 6th governor of Osun State. We had 31 grounds of appeal. INEC had 41 grounds of appeal. And Chief N.O. Oke, that you referred to, he was one of the counsels that represented the party. We were confident of our appeal on the principles of law. It's rather sad that some of the issues, some of the things that came up should not ordinarily have come up. But coming specifically to your question about our confidence, whether we're satisfied with the grounds of appeal or we're confident that we will sail through, I'll say yes, except that, in Nigeria today, people always use that word Nigerian factor. You're never 200% certain. But based entirely the position of the law and justice, I think we were expecting that we will sail through. Coming back to the point, the kernel of this appeal, you're still not there. That's issue 5.
Yes, we'll get there.
Which is on over.
Issues 5 and 7.
6 and 7.
Yes.
Which is on overvoting. But honestly, the facts on the ground, which there were certain things at the tribunal, which I think is important we should highlight. The primary evidence, the beavers, was not even looked into. The tribunal depended only on the report. On the report made available by INEC, which was signed by the deputy director of the ICT, the same woman who gave that report also gave us a report to us. And the report which she presented to the editorial side was incoherent. It was incomplete. And that was what the tribunal even based all the judgment on. An incomplete and an incoherent report. And we were surprised the register was not produced. The BVAS was not looked into. The ECATA was not mentioned. No witness, none of the agents was brought in as the agent, as a witness. So it was rather surprising that judgment was still resolved for the other side. Based on what we had on the ground, based on the facts of the case, we felt before going on appeal that we should have the judgment because the key aspects, the primary evidence was not even looked into.
Okay, so before my colleague comes in now, before we look at issues 5 and 7, 5, 6, 7, I'll take two of these things together now. During the tribunal, two of the witnesses presented by the AP, so one of them, I'm very sure, Razak Adeosun, was a special advisor to the governor. And so the Court of Appeal ruled that the expert witness called by the respondent is a member of the APC and the person interested in the case. One, do you think that the tribunal should have looked into that the way the Court of Appeal looked into it now? And two, the court ruled that although the statement by Justice Kume on Adeleke's dancing proclivity is unwarranted and condemnable, it does not in any way prove bias against the appellant. What do you make of this?
No, that's on the issue of bias.
Yes.
The issue of bias is different from your first question.
Yes, I'm taking two questions for you now.
On the issue of the first question, we're talking of justice. If you justice should be served. The people of Shu State voted for a candidate, and there was a petition to that effect, and only 2 witnesses, as was noticed. That's to let you know the extent of which the Court of Appeal went into this matter. In details, they went to the nitty-gritty. They produced only 2 witnesses. That is the respondents here, because we are the appellants. He was referring that they produced only 2 witnesses. The 2 witnesses, like you rightly said, one, an advisor to the governor, to the former governor, and even the other one who claimed to be an expert was an advisor, also was an aide, and was not even an expert. So the Court of Appeal even went to the extent of saying, who is the expert? They told the court who an expert should be. The witness that was brought by the now we refer to as respondents, but they were petitioners there, were not experts. Was not an expert. That's the witness that was referred to as an expert. So he wasn't an expert. And so what evidence could you adduce from those 2 witnesses? So Justice Shuaibu even went to the extent of saying that it was inconceivable that somebody who has been brought in as an expert to assume that these witnesses will have any probative value. We're talking of an election petition of a governor of a state. You have brought in 2 witnesses to prove your case. And there's an important issue, which I believe that what this panel of the Court of appeal, what they have done. Justice Mohammed Shuaibu, Justice Ifeoma Ofo, and Justice Stephen Ada. It's a classical, which they know that it will be referred to. There are some principles, and I believe they have enriched our jurisprudence. You don't, in the interest of justice, when you go on this type of matter, you don't depend on the case of the opposing side to try and prove your own case. What have you adduced? What have you brought to the table? That's what the Court of Appeal was saying. What have you brought to the table? How have you proven your case? Is this cogent and compelling enough? The evidence adduced. Of course, it wasn't cogent and compelling evidence. And so, that was obviously resolved in favor of the appellants. With the issue of the bias, which you said, which was the issue 8, on the issue of bias, this will also continue because we felt on going on appeal that what Justice Kume of the tribunal said by saying you don't go low and buga up. Yes, the Court of Appeal said we did not adduce enough evidence to show bias. However, the action of the tribunal chairman, Justice Kume, was condemnable. You know, when you condemn, when a higher court is saying we condemn what somebody has done, I think it goes a long way to show what happened at the tribunal. So the action with Justice Kume, by what he said, was condemned by the Court of Appeal. However, the Court of Appeal stated that we did not adduce enough evidence to show that bias. So that matter was resolved in favor of the respondents in the Court of Appeal.
All right. My question will be that in an argument through a cross appeal by the counsel to Oyetola, that's Akinolu Jimmy, he noted that the tribunal erred in law when it held that Adeleke was qualified to contest for the election, even after being found to have submitted a forged certificate. Now, he said that he was asking the appeal court to hold that Governor Adeleke was not qualified to stand for the election in the first instance. Now, how would you respond to that? I mean, could it be a ground for, you know, their own case now, maybe at the Supreme Court or something?
I will advise them not to ever even say that again. You're talking of forgery. It has been laid to rest. There was never any forgery. You know, when you want to prove forgery, forgery is a criminal offense, mind you. And that was made abundantly clear by the Court of Appeal. Not only that, you have to prove something beyond reasonable doubt, but not even only that aspect. To show this issue, which I think is classical, and I was rather surprised that this was made a point by the respondents. An example is the Obaseki case, the governor of Edo State. If you want to prove a certificate is not one, you bring the issuing officer. You come to the court to prove it. But that was not even the issue. You didn't bring anybody. Then how have you proven forgery? There was no matter of forgery. This has been laid to rest by Honorable Justice Agim, now of the Supreme Court. In an earlier case, in 2019, that's why we were surprised that Chief Olujimi went on and on and on, and even didn't take the hint from the court. When the court said, is the forgery here? Eventually, he sat down. I don't think they will bring it up again because there was never any forgery. There was never any time that forgery was established. Having gone through that judgment that I still refer to, that Justice Agim delivered, because he went to the nitty-gritty of what forgery should be, and that there was never any forgery. Governor Adeleke never forged anything. So I would be surprised if they call that ground, because I know the Supreme Court will go heavy, in fact, much, much heavier than what transpired in the Court of Appeal on the matter.
All right.
So there was never forgery.
Okay, so because of our time, let's look at the issues now, issues 4 to 7 now. The Court of Appeal faulted the tribunal. Okay, we've looked at 4, now 5 rather, which borders on overvoting. The tribunal held that overvoting was established, but Justice Oguli differed and said that the petitioners failed woefully to prove their point. And it seems that the appeal court told that line by talking about the fact that the tribunal relied only on the tables showing overvoting provided by Mr. Oyetola and the APC without giving due consideration to INEC's voter register, and also faulted the Oyetola and APC for relying on the back-end server, failing to look at the voters register, which forms the foundation of the whole electoral process. Now, you've hinted at that in your opening remark and said that the tribunal failed in looking at the voters register and the BVAS machines. How did you perceive this judgment now in contrast to that of the tribunal?
Oh, this is justice. This will be the precedent in future cases on the aspect of overvoting. That's why I said this has enriched our jurisprudence. If you want to prove any overvoting, what this case has done to show is that you have to bring the register. They didn't bring no register. You have to refer to the BVAS. How about the ECAT, which is what has been filled as the record, as what has transpired in any polling unit? That's a report of the election. The election result is your ECAT. You know, for you, and that's why we were surprised, for the tribunal, the original tribunal, to have gone ahead to decide the matter just on the report. Even the agents were not brought in. Not one single polling agent was brought in to give evidence. You know, you have to prove your case, and that's why the tribunal made it abundantly clear that overvoting, the issue of overvoting must be proved by cogent and compelling evidence. You do not rely on the opposing side to try and look for what you can get from them. And that's what they did by just getting a report from what the lady, the deputy director of ICT of INEC, just a report, the primary evidence put aside. So I believe that the issue of overvoting, which is carnal, in combination with the register, which is the foundation, and of course the ECAT, is where I think that this case really has been brought to the fore. And that's why I said that it will be a classical precedent for future cases on overvoting in any election process. And honestly, I think that justice was served at the end of the day.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. Some insightful statements made there by Sani Owolade, who's counsel to Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke, during the tribunal process and now at the Court of Appeal. But thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's where we'll leave it for the first leg of the interview. When we return, we'll take the second leg. To stay with us.
Aminatu, the legendary queen of Zazzau, is best known to historians as Queen Amina of Zaria. an old walled town and capital of the Hausa state of Zazzau. Amina was a great warrior and the first woman to rule the ancient kingdom of Zazzau. Her 34 years as queen witnessed an unprecedented expansion of Zazzau by conquests. Queen Amina of Zaria belongs to the class of Amazons by the might of her army and her strings of conquests. She opened Zaria to trans-border trade and was said to have initiated kola nut cultivation in the ancient kingdom. The Hausa Muslim figure was born in 1533 and died in 1610 at the age of 77 years. Folklores remember Aminatu, the queen of Zazzau, as a brave, smart and talented leader, whose giant statue now adorns the National Arts Theatre in Lagos, Nigeria, while many educational institutions bear her name. Western Spring Television identifies Queen Amina as a watershed character in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white supremacist in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history.
Sports is a culture on its own. It has its own language, its own people, with their own way of life. The world of sports is never void of actions, stories, dramas, and scandals. I guess you need a sports show that can walk the walk and talk the talk.
On this show, we answer all your sporting questions. The whens, the whys, the wheres, and even the what ifs. Sports Spring is that show that will give you that new lease of life you've been looking for in sport journalism. Join me, Joseph Atewe,
and your sports Amazon, Nengi Enes.
On this station, Western Spring Television, channel 190, only on Star Times.
Let's talk sports. Let's speak the most universal language of the world.
According to the words of Michael Forbes, one who never asks questions either knows everything or nothing. Watch me as I ask the questions you think no one wants to answer. Even questions it appears no one has got the guts to ask. My name is Femi Adefila and I've got the gut. Let's ask the pertinent questions and watch as we get answers.
Named Mao Zedong at birth, but globally known as Mao Zedong, he was a Chinese revolutionary and founder, People's Republic of China, which he led as chairman of the Chinese Communist Party from 1949 until his death in 1976. He was a communist who believed in the attainment of power by the instrumentality of gun. His wise saying, "Political power grows out of the barrel of gun," formed the major plank of his revolutionary struggle for the control of China. In the long span of his leadership and political power, Mao Zedong relentlessly entrenched the communist philosophy in China, which emphasized the revolutionary struggle of the vast majority of people against the exploiting class and their state structures. The communist leaders defined the class struggle as people's war. Mao Zedong was a story of grass to grace, having risen from peasantry to preeminent status as China's most respected leader. Western Spring Television identifies Mao Zedong as a major character in history. Dramatist, playwright, and
all right, welcome back to the show. We're still talking about the judgment of the Court of Appeal on Friday, March 24th in Abuja, repealing the judgment of the tribunal given on the 27th of January 2023. We're now joined by Chief Press Secretary to former Governor of Osun State, Mr. Adegboyega Oyetola, Mr. Ismail Omikpidon, live via Zoom. Good morning, Mr. Omikpidon.
Good morning, Emmanuel.
Okay, so let's look at the issues. First of all, what was your immediate reaction to the judgment of the Court of Appeal?
Well, our immediate reaction was first to take it in good faith, because as persons who believe very strongly in the rule of law and due process, and as people who believe in faith, we believe very strongly that what happened at the appellate court was how it was designed to happen, and that did not in any way affect our absolute faith in the judiciary of this country.
Okay, so now let's look at the nitty-gritty. You before the tribunal judgment, you had always said that your principal lost the vote count and not the election. And at the time of the tribunal, it seemed that your position had been validated. But now that that judgment of the tribunal had been overturned, what do you make of that vis-a-vis what your claims were in the initial stage?
Thank you very much. You see, the good thing is the appeal court is not the last bus stop as far as governorship election litigation is concerned. Therefore, I believe very strongly that whatever happened at the appellate court cannot be said to be the final decision as far as this case is concerned. Don't forget that before the judgment of the appeal court, I had the privilege of appearing on a TV set with my senior brother who just left your studio, the former attorney general. He was a former attorney general in the state, Barrister Mr. Niyo Wolade, sorry. And in one of our encounters, where he was claiming that the tribunal was biased, I challenged him that you are a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but as a reporter, I do know that if you have a case, whether election case or any case, and you perceive bias, that you ought to have raised it in the open court. Let everybody hear that this judge or this panel is biased towards you, but that when you fail to raise it in the open court and you wait on the end of the judgment before you start raising the issue of bias, that I doubt if that will be tenable. And I'm happy that that was a position of the appeal court. The appeal court did, in fact, in the judgment, the appeal court said that ordinarily they ought to have raised that issue of bias from the beginning of the proceeding. That is one. Two, the basis upon which the appeal court took the decision, especially on the issue of voting, I believe very strongly that it will not stand the test of time. And I'll give a few instances. One, in the old Electoral Act, you know that if you go to a polling unit to vote, you will be accredited and then go home and come back later to come and vote. And so during that regime, you cannot prove over voting without voter register, because it is only through voter register that they will be able to ascertain the number of persons who came to vote. But with the new Electoral Act, go and look at Section 47 of the Electoral Act. That section was to cure the anomaly of the voter register. With the new Electoral Act, as you get to the polling unit, you are accredited and you vote. And so if you are accredited and you vote, you do not, to the best of my knowledge, need the voter register to approve of our voting. Because Section 51, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act stated clearly that where the vote, total vote cast, exceed number of accreditation in any polling unit, that the result of that polling unit will be cancelled. Because you determine overvoting by taking the total number of accredited voters and the result side by side. So you do not, I say with all sense of modesty, that you do not need a voter register to prove overvoting.
Is that in line? Is that in line with the law, Mr. Omekpidon, considering the position of the Court of Appeal? Yes, now?
I just quoted the law for you. Go and look at the Electoral Act. Look at Section 47. Look at Section 51, subsection 1 and subsection 2. These things are stated clearly there. Go and check it. You do not need a voter register to prove overvoting, because the only way you can prove overvoting is when you take the number of accredited voters and the result as declared side by side. And if you look at Section 64, particularly Section 64, subsection 6 of the Electoral Act, it outlined the steps on how to resolve overvoting. Go and check it. And so I believe very strongly that this case is a potential case for the Supreme Court. Again, the issue of a back-end server. You recall that shortly after the presidential election, the Labour Party said they wanted to inspect INEC materials. INEC said they wanted to conduct governorship election. The Labour Party raised the alarm that the Beavers machine will be tampered with. And go and check the affidavit filed by INEC at the appeal court, which was granted. INEC stated it clearly in black and white that all the accreditation data will be stored in its back-end server, and that anytime they need it, it could be retrieved from the back-end server. Go and check the affidavit. So if INEC is telling us that the data in its back-end server is authentic, that they stored it, they extracted it from the Beavers machine and stored it there, I wonder if the decision of the court that we cannot rely on back-end server will stand. Don't forget that at the tribunal, if you recall, there were about 3 reports from Beavers. The first one was obtained by my principal and his party on July 27th, 2022. The second one was obtained by PDP on August 22nd, 2022. Now, the third one was what PDP claimed was the report of the physical inspection of the Beavers machine. Now, was it the PDP that conducted the election? If PDP did not conduct the election, how can PDP present a report of the election he did not conduct? And so these are some of the issues that I believe Supreme Court will help us resolve.
Okay, so now you've raised very salient issues. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a justice of the Supreme Court, but your position is your position, and I'd like to say that that's valid. Now, the Court of Appeal also talked about the kind of witness that the APC presented, saying it wasn't an expert and that it was a person interested in the case. Now, did your party factor that in before presenting that witness at the tribunal?
And thank you very much. The witness in question retired as a statistician in the state, and the records can be cross-checked. I don't know how else an expert can be described or defined. I remember at the tribunal, their claim was that he did not present his certificate. I don't know how true is that. But again, I will refer you to section 137 of the Electoral Act. What that section said in relation to election matter is that where the irregularities or the non-compliance you are complaining about are manifestly seen in the document, you do not need to call a witness. If you have a copy, as I'm speaking, you can cross-check. That's section 137 of the Electoral Act. But the learned justices, in their wisdom, they are saying, notwithstanding the section of that Electoral Act, we still needed to call witnesses. Because by the provision of that Electoral Act, by a simple understanding and reading of that section, what that section simply says is that when you have documents to show manifestly the issues you are complaining about, and in this case, the document we had was the report from the BVAS machine as obtained from INEC's backend server. And in that report, it was manifestly clear that the result has entered in from ECA, which is the document that which will enter the result of the election, that the number of accredited voters do not tally with what is in the BVAS report. And so that is non-compliance. So our argument is that perhaps BVAS was bypassed in those areas, about 744 of those polling units. And that is our argument. You understand? So we follow the law to the letter. And that's why I'm quoting all these relevant sections for you to also cross-check. But the learned justices are saying that in spite of that section, we ought to have called witnesses. So we wait to see what the Supreme Court will decide on that score.
So the appeal court also ruled that relying on the data from the backend server, failing to look at voters' registers, does not strengthen your allegations of overvoting. It also looked at the failure to tender the BVAS machines. These issues are, they've now been brought out and brought up by the Court of Appeal, and you are saying that you're heading to the Supreme Court. But let's look at it. Failing to tender the BVAS machines and relying only on data from the backend server. How do you reconcile this, Mr. Omikpinon?
Thank you very much. If you go to the ATM and maybe you try to take money, or maybe you use the POS to do transaction, and the transaction declined, do you need to take the POS machine to the bank? All you need is a report being generated from the POS machine. Unless if you are telling me that the report as generated by POS machine is false. Because in this case, I have just mentioned to you that INEC filed an affidavit before the appeal court. And the affidavit was granted to say that whatever it is in their BVAS machine will be stored in their backend server. And at any time anybody wants to access the data of accreditation, that it could be accessed from their backend server. So how how on earth will you now tell me that we cannot rely on INEC's backend server? That's why I told you from the beginning that there are issues that still needed to be resolved by a higher court, because INEC is telling you that they store accreditation data in their backend server. And this happened just recently, less than 3 or 2 weeks ago. So this is not glaring. Again, the election in Enugu, the election in Abia, governorship election that was just said on March 18, when there were issues concerning issue of accreditation and result, INEC referred to their backend server, and this was less than 3 days after the election was held.
Oh, could you take it back a few sentences?
Yes, I was saying that in the election that was held in Enugu,
yes,
that was held in Abia, when there were issues concerning issue of total vote cast and accreditation, INEC referred to his backend server. This was just barely 3 days after the election was held. And so if INEC will file an affidavit before the appeal court in respect of the presidential election, saying that accreditation data will be stored in his backend server, I believe very strongly that we have a good ground to appeal to the Supreme Court. Because whatever decision that the court made of Osun's election litigation will have far-reaching effects on all other governorship litigations coming behind. That is the implication.
Okay, so the issues that were resolved, you know, some of them your members of your party have referred to as pedestrian, including the issue of the bias, the issue of the justice not signing the judgment and all of that. But the minority judgment of the tribunal on the 27th of January seemed to tally with that of the Court of Appeal. Does it bother you that there seems to be a correlation between a minority judgment? The Justice Oguli, Justice Oguli said that the petitioner failed to woefully failed to prove its point, and the Court of Appeal is saying now that what you relied on did not strengthen your allegations of overvoting.
Well, for want of repeating myself, when we saw the minority judgment, even while the proceedings was on at the tribunal, when the counsel for both INEC and PDP and the governor, Senator Ademola Adeleke, were raising those issues of voter register, our lawyers argued, and they placed the same argument before the appeal court, that this issue of voter register has been dealt with by the new Electoral Act. And so the mere fact that, in your words, the appeal court judgment appears to align with the minority judgment does not in any way detract from the provision of the Electoral Act, which I just quoted copiously for you. And at your own leisure time, you can take a look at them. Look, voter register will only tell you number of registered voters in each polling unit. It will not tell you the number of those who came to vote on that day. And to determine overvoting with regards to section 51 subsection 2 of the Electoral Act, you put number of accredited voters side by side with the total votes cast as declared. So what do you need voter register for? To prove overvoting. I say it with all sense of modesty that decision is a decision that will be tested at the Supreme Court, because the provisions of the Electoral Act are very clear.
Okay, so in the aftermath of that judgment, you wrote a piece talking about the position of your principal approaching the Supreme Court. There are some who have said that the party needs to prevail on that some persons need to prevail on the Governor Itola, former Governor Itola, not to approach the Supreme Court in the interest of democracy and justice. What do you make of all of that statement?
Well, I see that as an attempt to blackmail my principal emotionally and to bully him to silence. Look at it this way. 4 years ago, and I think it's about 5 years ago now, when we had the similar election litigation, until we came back from the Supreme Court in July 2019, Senator Ademola Adeleke never congratulated my principal. So if he had the opportunity of pursuing his case up to the Supreme Court in 2019, how on earth will anybody now say that my principal should not pursue his own case, especially when we believe very strongly that there appear to be a miscarriage of justice? And so I see it as emotional blackmail. I see it as an attempt to bully him to silence. And I just say that it will not work. Don't forget that when we went to the tribunal, what the PDP and their lawyers were saying was that we had no case. And when the tribunal judgment came, they started abusing everybody, cursing everybody. Now that the judgment is in their favor, they are praising everybody. I hope that by the time the table turns, they won't turn around and begin to cause.
Well, the line seems to be breaking there. The line seems to be breaking. Okay, Mr. Mikpidon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you were saying something about when the tables turn.
Yes, I said that I hope when the table turns, they won't turn around to begin to abuse everybody, including the members of the judiciary, the way they did when the tribunal judgment was delivered.
All right, well, thank you.
And like I said, there's something very interesting about this case, and I hope we'll all be alive to do a proper review at the end of the day. When the case was about to commence at the tribunal, what the PDP lawyers were saying was that there were some polling units where 2 Beavers machines were used, and that there was a need to merge the result. But surprisingly, throughout the tribunal proceedings, there was no way any evidence was led with regards to that. That is one. 2, the synchronized Beavers report that was tendered by INEC in court. That same synchronized Beavers report contained irregularities in over 100 polling units. As a matter of fact, INEC counsel even went as far as saying that irregularities occur in over 1,000 polling units. That is INEC admitting. So, for me, all the witnesses that were lined up by INEC in court, including the one lined up by the PDP, testify to the fact that they were overvoting in that election. But, like I said, we are proceeding to the Apex Court, and I believe very strongly that we'll get justice at the Apex Court.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Ismail Mikpidon, who is the CPS Chief Press Secretary to former Governor Adegboyega Oyetola. Thank you for starting your day with us, and we wish you best of luck in your endeavors.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.
All right, so that's where we end the program this morning, but I'll be coming back to give you what's trending, some reactions to that Court of Appeal judgment on social media, and some interesting videos that we'll have to show you this morning.
I'm Timothy Okweajijola. Thanks for joining us this morning.